Welcome to this month's edition of the Inside Webinar series. This month, we are talking listening skills for trainers. And with me today is CarriersEdge CEO Jane Jazrawy. And before we go further, I want to remind everyone that if you've got questions, you can put them right in the Q&A chat, and we will try and get to them as best we can. And if we can't get to all of them, we will send out some answers afterwards, along with the recording. And if you are looking for more episodes of the webinar series, you can find us right on the website in the resources section, as well as on the YouTube channel. And if you go there, don't forget to like and subscribe. Jane, how are you?
I'm very well, as you do. Like and subscribe as you do on YouTube. So
As
that
you
would
do.
be appreciated.
And
Uh,
follow on Spotify or something like that. I'm not sure how you
well, that's our podcast. So
podcast.
there's a CE podcast that is audio only for the audio people, the audio only. Is that an audio file? People who only like audio? But if you don't, I can't remember what audio file actually means. Is it no audio or all the audio? I can't remember. I'm sure somebody is going to say something in the chat.
I'm
Um, what, do you
I
know?
don't doubt that it's all of the audio all the time.
Okay, but Spotify is where you can find the CE podcast that is Mark and I, Mark Morrell, my co-founder, and the Best Fleets podcast, which is also on YouTube, but I think it's YouTube, but you can also find it on the Best Fleets to Drive For website. And by the way, nominations for 2025 are open. So if you think you can be a Best Fleet to Drive For, or you'd like to go through the process and learn a lot about your company, then ask a driver to nominate you, and that will start you off, and you'll get a link to the giant questionnaire
And
and have more interactions with us.
and I'm assuming anyone who's involved is going to have at least one driver that likes them. So, and if
That
you
is the
don't,
hope. That is the hope, that you have one driver that actually thinks you're a good fleet to drive for. Yeah.
absolutely. So today, I mean, lots of people know you, Jane, and they know
Mhm.
your work at CarriersEdge and Invest Fleets, but also your background in instructional design and in teaching and in thinking about learning in a bunch of different ways.
Yes.
So today, I want to talk a little bit about that part of communication, which is less talk and more listen, and in particular, the problems that trainers can have across a bunch of different contexts in terms of their listening skills, the way that can break things down, the way it can lift things up, so on and so forth. So off the
Well,
top,
I
oh,
have one I have one really good quote to get you through this, to think about, is to hear between the lines. That is something that I think, like, keep that in mind, keep that line in mind, hearing
okay,
between the lines and how you can do that and why it's important.
okay. So if I'm going to categorize sort of the different parts of communication, particularly when you're training,
Mhm.
you got to have a learning goal in mind. You've got to understand, sort of where your students are at, and then you've got to have the ability to listen. And one of the problems is how there's other things you can get better at. You can learn about how to make learning goals, and you can learn a lot about your students and build relationships. How do you learn how to listen?
It's one of those, yeah, it's tough if it doesn't come naturally for you. One of the biggest issues that you have as a trainer is that you, like now, you do a lot of talking. And when you do a lot of talking, it can start to become repetitive and rote because you're saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I've done those. That's why I don't really like stand up, is because I really have a hard time with standing in front of a room and saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I start now to look at other people who I know are saying the same thing over and over again. I went to a concert on Friday, and I know that it was 2 nights. So I was listening to the stories that were being told and thinking, oh, you're going to say exactly the same thing tomorrow night. And how does that, like, audiences don't really know that. This is really the key, is that what you're doing for an audience like it could be done 50 times before. And if you don't actually show how many times you've done it, like if you seem interested every single time, like this is the third time I've talked about listening skills, but it's a different format, so it's kind of fresh. But if you're doing training and you're saying the same thing over and over and over again, it can start to sound really tired. It's almost like you sound like you're reading things. So that is one of the keys to being interesting and being and thinking about how it needs to be fresh. So it's not just listening. You kind of have to think about how you are speaking and how you are interacting. And interaction, listening is part of that interaction. So and I do have a point. I actually do. When you do the same thing over and over and over again, that is, you've got this boringness that's happening for you as a speaker. But on the other hand, your brain goes faster, or other people's brains go faster than people talk. So your brain is moving faster. You are also doing something that is kind of boring. Well, not boring, but repetitive. So
Right.
you have to fight against these things. And what I like to call it is a little bit of situational awareness. So listening is not necessarily about what you say when you stop talking, when the other person is talking, is you're aware of the other things that are going on in a room, especially when you're a trainer. So are you aware of, is everybody listening to you? Are people looking at their phones? Why would they be looking at their phones? Did you tell them to? Are people having a side chat? Are people like, what is, you have to read the room, and that situational awareness is really, really important. So when you are trying to learn listening skills or learning to improve, then you have to look at a whole bunch of different factors. And one is, can you read the room? Do you leave space to, to process what other people are saying? Or are you already thinking of what you're going to say before people are finished? So it's that game of tennis where, you receive something, and are you receiving it and then you are hitting it back before the other person has even tried to go. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into the whole listening skills improvement process, but a lot of it is practice. And it's like playing an instrument. You can't, you're not going to get good at it by following these 10 tips. It's not going to happen. What you need to do is think about what, you have to have, or I would get someone else to help you actually, but think about what is happening when you are teaching. How much are you paying attention to the other person, and how are you responding to that? So that all of those factors go into it, and we can
So
drill down on any of those.
that situational awareness is not just the exterior situation, but also your own self. And so someone who is a good listener can still fall into a trap. And so I think
Yes.
about when I'm in the audience and the speaker says something that is maybe really offensive or annoying, whatever it is, and you come up with the perfect response. And in your mind, you're just like, okay, I'm going to say this. But in those moments that you're waiting for your turn, your brain kind of blocks out everything else that they're saying. And that's a very human reaction. Like your heart's going, like, I'm going to say this is going to be great. And you've missed everything else. And a really good listener can still fall into those traps. So
Absolutely. Emotions and anger and like intense emotions, it's kind of like road rage, right? You are a good driver normally, but your emotions kind of bubble up and go insane, and your brain is dealing with the emotions and all of the hormones that are released by that, and you stop paying attention to the road. It's the same thing. If you are having an emotional response to something that somebody has said, you're going to do whatever your emotion, like whatever your gut emotional response is going to be. So you're going to stop listening. You're going to want to have something to shut them down or teach them a lesson or whatever. And the hardest thing to do is to say, okay, I need to take a deep breath. I need to get my I need to get my stuff together and then I can respond. What is important to know that when you are talking, when you're engaging with someone in terms of listening skills, and I want to separate an argument from just regular classroom stuff.
Mhm.
But give yourself some space. You don't have to answer right away. You can think about it. And one of the best tools that I have used that I always would recommend to anybody is tell people when you're thinking about something they said. So you pause, and people have done this in job interviews with me, and I love it.
Mm.
It's like, okay, you're thinking about what I said. This is good. You don't have a pat answer. I'm impressed. You're actually considering what I said. Tell people I'm thinking about this. Don't just, go in immediately and don't ignore it. Like ignoring something, especially in a classroom, ignoring somebody who has a question or who is being infuriating, who is interrupting or whatever that's happening, or you don't know the answer to the question. It's very important that you tell them how you're going to respond and think about how you respond to different situations. That goes back to that situational awareness. How am I going to respond in this situation and this situation? Because they tend to repeat themselves.
So communicate the fact that you're listening. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to stick with the classroom for a second. You're not fond of stand up, but it's part of the training schematic, and that's going to happen. And I'm wondering about how good trainers in their listening can interpret or misinterpret what their students are doing. So,
Misinterpretation happens all the time.
hmm,
Like I don't think that's a problem. You are going to, so you go back to, you're not going to get it right all the time the first time. What is really important is how you make up for it or what you do instead. So you say, someone asks you a question and you misinterpret it because you weren't really listening. You were only listening to the first half of the question. So you thought you knew the second
hmm,
half of the question and you start answering that question. Also happens in webinars on radio. It happens all the time because I actually start writing down questions just to make sure that I'm keeping track of, what exactly it is that they want me to talk about. So when you're in a classroom and you do that and you make a mistake because your brain is going faster than your ears can, or than your brain is processing the stuff coming in,
hmm.
and you eventually will realize that you're not doing the right thing. You have made a mistake. Oh my God. And so in your head, you're talking and you're talking, and you see the look on someone's situational awareness. You see the look on someone's face, or they're shaking their head, or they're saying, no, 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 that's not what I was asking. So that's pretty good clue that you've misinterpreted. What the important part is to stop and say, oh, and apologize and say, oh, sorry about that. What was the question again? And then stop yourself from answering questions before they're actually completely asked. It's like Jeopardy. You're not going to get the points if you didn't get the last word of the clue.
Right.
And that's practice. But the important part is to not go, oh my God, I made a mistake. We're going to pretend nothing happened and just keep going on. And so the person who asked the question or had the comment is going to feel bad. You're going to feel bad because you didn't deal with it very well. Saying you made a mistake in front of a room is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I have made horrendous mistakes in front of lots and lots of hundreds of people, and life goes on. If you admit it, you could probably get a laugh.
So
And then it's okay.
here's my admission for the phrasing of the question. What I wanted to get at was interpreting the things that students are doing in the classroom rather than something they said and sort of misinterpreting that. So, for example, they're looking at their phone or they're talking to someone who's next to them, and there's a temptation for classroom leaders to be like, that's personally insulting to me. I'm up here trying to do all this, and now,
Okay. So this is a really good example of I'm not totally sure what the question is.
hmm.
And so I think I answered the wrong question.
Well, I asked it in a way that was, I think, too vague or ambiguous.
Okay.
And so in this case, so it when you're listening to, say, some nonverbal stuff, what your students are doing, and you can misinterpret what it is that they're doing or their intentions. So
Oh, okay.
so the
So
two
the
who are
missing,
talking in the back might
right.
actually be really interested in what in this idea that you brought up, but you interpret it as they're just goofing around.
Oh, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, I would say that there's a difference between verbal and nonverbal. Well, the situational awareness thing that is kind of it's coming into play in all of these things.
Mhm.
But there's listening skills when someone is asking you a direct question, and there's listening skills when you are not in the conversation, when you are listening to the environment, what's happening in the room. And as a trainer, you have to do that. And I always felt when I was doing stand-up training or classroom training, I always felt like I was kind of the host of a
Hmm.
party and that you had to make sure that everybody was okay. Like this, I think, I don't know if every trainer feels like that, but it's, people, you have invited people into your space and you control that space and you are not so much the leader as the host. And so you are, I think in my head, I expect people to treat it that way. And probably I had never communicated that until this very second. But that's how I'm looking at it. So if people are talking in the back, yeah, it can be annoying. But you can also usually hear what they're talking about. And even if they are on their phones, if they're laughing or whatever, what I do instead of talking to them or saying something, I usually just move towards them, just move
Hmm.
closer to them, and they'll stop. Or if you move closer to them, so you're at the front of the room, people in the back are talking, you want them to stop talking, just do keep doing what you were doing, just move closer to them, and they will either engage with you or stop. And either one is fine. But you're not, the emotion is out of it because, you never know. Like sometimes there might be an emergency, it might be something that is, like you said, like something that is relevant. Um, so it comes back to situational awareness and changing a situation without doing anything out loud, like you often can do that. But the worst thing to do is to, talk louder or get confrontational. It's you go back to road rage, when you
Hmm.
have nonverbal behavior in a car, you speed up, you start tailgating, you start yelling inside your car. If you're really mad, you roll down your window and start yelling outside your car. That you can do that in a classroom too. I mean, you have emotions in a classroom and you're just yourself. You're kind of the driver and you kind of um you can act out on these things. Or you can say, I'm, this is just a training class and I can deal with it. I have the tools to deal with it. So if you don't engage and you just try and um, get away from the other driver, or in this case, like for driving, you would try and get away from someone who has road rage, or if you have road rage, you should probably slow down. Um, but when you're in a classroom, then you are going towards them, which seems kind of weird, but going
Hmm.
towards them, and this works with children, it works with adults, it works with your family, it just works. Just move closer. That's all you have to do.
Because teaching just is relational, right?
Exactly. It is. And teaching, yeah, I think that's a really good line, is that you you don't actually put information into other people's brains as much as you make it as risk-free as possible for them to take the information into their own brains. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Hmm. As risk free as possible, as in avoiding the risk of being embarrassed, or
Oh, there's so many risks in a classroom for a
hmm.
student. Oh, it's not even funny. There's just like you don't even so say you have a class of 5 people. There are 5 heads. You don't know what's going on in their brains. And So one of the important, and this is where listening skills comes in really handy, is to not necessarily just listen to what everybody says, is to recognize that everybody has their own individual stuff going on. And you have to try and hear or try and figure out how to reach all of these people. So you give them some information and then you watch what's going on. You don't wait for questions. You watch what's going on. Are they paying attention to you? Are they, what are they doing? And so if they feel at risk, so when I say risk, there's like so many things. They may not want to be there. That is a risk. So they're in this room, don't want to be in the room. They're taking a class or a course, even online, they don't want to do. So there's a barrier there you don't know about, you can't control. They may be angry about something that has nothing to do with you. And I've had that experience not a few times where, they're not going to learn anything because they're busy being somewhere else.
Mm.
They may have an unbearable itch, like that may be
Okay.
completely
Okay.
distracting them.
Yeah.
And now I have an itch. I have an itch on my back now. I need a ruler. But that happens with kids a lot who or there may be people with ADHD or autism who have other things that are going on in their head, or they're just scared of failing. I think that's the most common thing, is that everybody is scared that they're failing at whatever it is. And even if you're just sitting in a classroom and you're not doing anything, there is the possibility of failure if you think you don't understand something, and or you aren't understanding anything, but you're too scared to actually ask a question. And I find that there's a lot of audiences where no one's going to ask a question. So you can't really listen to that, right? Like there's not much to do. All you can do, that situational awareness, where you're thinking, okay, I'm doing let's say I'm teaching, what would I be teaching? How to safe following distance. There you go. Safe following distance.
Mm.
Absolutely nobody is responding to me. I am feeling dead. There's no energy. It's dead air.
You're getting crickets.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that is hearing between the lines. It's like, okay, like I have to do something now. Nobody has said anything. I haven't had to listen to anything but the sound of my own voice, which gets very tiresome at times. So how am I going to deal with this situation? Am I going to keep talking, or am I going to just stop and see what's happening with everyone? And the worst question to ask, in my opinion, is everybody okay?
Because you don't really expect, you're probably not going to get the answer. And really, you're just looking for a signal to keep pushing on.
Well, if I said, if you were in there's a couple of problems. The first problem is it's a closed question.
Hmm.
So when you are practicing listening skills, part of what you have to do is figure out how to answer, or how to ask a question that doesn't have a yes or no answer. It's an explanation answer. You have to try and get them to talk. And this is one of the things that I have worked on quite a bit throughout my career, is getting people to talk.
Hmm.
What they will do, yes or no, and they will answer yes or no. So if you say, is everybody okay? Is everybody following me? They're going to say yes. 99% of the time, you ask if everyone's okay, ask if everyone's following, ask, a yes or no question. Everybody will do this. Is there anything else that you want to cover? No. Is everybody following? Yes. You know what the answer is before you even finish the question. So if you want to actually find out, and that's what listening skills are all about, is being able, it goes back to situational awareness, actually understanding what is going on around you and being able to evaluate it and figure out what you're going to do after that. So it's so open-ended questions,
Hmm.
which are the opposite of yes no questions, are okay, so everybody Nobody has asked any questions. And you can say this to people. No one's asked any questions. You all are looking a slight bit bored. So I want to, tell me what you've learned. So here's question one. How do you calculate? I have a 20-foot multiple vehicle combination. How do I calculate my following distance? And if nobody says anything, you pick on people. Or if I give you a question that's too big, you
Mm,
can, and everybody's silent, so cricket, cricket, cricket. Okay, so let me break it down. First step, what do you have to do? And
right.
then you say, do you know the first step? And if, um, and you can pick on people. And students don't like this because they feel picked on. But when I do it, you try to do it in terms of, you need to get this information. So here's how I'm going to do it.
Right.
And you cannot have people just be silent for the entire time if you are invested in them leaving the room with a certain amount of information.
I do recall when I was in school, I had a teacher who someone at some point told him, after you ask a question, wait 10 seconds to give people space. And that's good advice, but you could set your watch by it. And he'd just say, anyone have questions? We'd all start counting quietly. And at 10
Yeah.
seconds, he would just move on. So
Well, anyone have any questions? Yeah, that's a yes, no. And
yeah.
sometimes you do that when you think it's okay. Like if you're having a lot of back and forth and you think that you feel like everybody is getting it or you're doing something easy, then yeah, you can do that. Or,
Hmm.
any other questions before I move on? You're okay with that. It's the, it's where you have the situation where you're trying to address a group of people and you're not getting
Uptake.
anything.
Yeah.
And that's so there's the you have different situations when you're teaching. You have the um, I'm giving you information, and then you also have I'm giving you information, and now I want to see the second part is I want to see if you've processed that. And that's where you do things like an activity or a discussion. Or like you put everybody in groups and say, okay, I just told you something for 20 minutes. Now you go and figure out the 5 top questions that you have about this subject. Or you go and make a poster about the subject or whatever it is that you're going to do. That also helps people process the information and will get them talking. So if you put people in groups,
Hmm.
guess what? They have to talk to each other.
Think, parent, share.
Yeah, it actually the and putting people into groups, you have to be careful of the actual audience because sometimes they're not gonna. I usually try and put people in groups. I usually take charge and say, I'm gonna put you in a group. You don't have any choice. And everybody goes, oh, thank God.
Rather than self-select. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, have you ever been in a group where they've said, you know, find a partner, get into a group, and you've got that, oh my God,
It happened to me last week at NPTC where there was a roundtable discussion, and all of a sudden, people you've
you had
never
to
met
get into,
before,
sorry?
and you've got to get into a group. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really difficult. So one of the things that I do that is really going to help, and this doesn't really relate to listening skills, but I'm kind of giving you advice on or giving you tips on preventative
Hmm.
listening skills so that you don't have to do the difficult part of it. And that difficult part is when you are talking to someone and there's an issue. And that's when you have the difficult, but if you can prevent any kind of difficult interaction, that's the way to go. So putting people into a group is going to prevent you from finding straggler. People escape as well. I don't know, grown-ups do, the kids can't do this, but it's amazing. Can you all get yourself into a group? Oh, you have to go take a call. Oh, you have to go to the washroom. Okay, all right, bye. Like they leave. People actually leave. I don't know if anybody left when
Yep.
yeah. So be careful. If you do put people into groups, like don't make it scary.
Right.
People don't want to be in groups. They have shown up and they are, you know, they don't want to do anything. So if you want to make someone do something like stand up and exercise or turn to the partner, turn to the person to the left, like if you're going to do partner stuff, say
Mm.
turn to the person to your left and, introduce yourself because people are really reluctant to do it. Children are reluctant to do it. Adults, everyone is reluctant to do it because it's risky.
So I want to connect two things that you said. One, when we talked about the scariness of being, picked on, I imagine that that is easier when you've already got a relationship. Like you bring your team in for a quarterly, it's Gary, right? You're going to pick on Gary. You've got a relationship with Gary. It's easier. But it doesn't have to be terrible if you don't know them as well. But what that is you've got to be the adult in the room, both in terms of guiding them, like you were saying, pair them up, don't let them pair, and also you've got to be responsible for all the emotions that are going on.
You're not really responsible
Well,
for it.
responsive,
You have to acknowledge
responsive to,
it.
yeah,
You have to be, yes, you have to be responsive. So if there
yeah,
is underlying anxiety in the room or anger in the room, then you should deal with it. You should just deal with it. And that's when listening, uh, that's when making sure that you give people space, make sure that it's about risk as well.
hmm,
And so, like I said, about risk, everybody feels there's a certain level of risk in going into an unfamiliar situation, which a classroom is, or a
right.
training session, or whatever. Even going online can be risky for some people. They don't want to, doing online training can be risky when they don't feel like they're very good with computers and that kind of thing.
Right.
But so when you're feeling, oh crap, I lost my train of thought.
Uh,
What were we
uh,
talking about?
Parent and the adult in the room,
Oh, yeah, and
being responsive. Yeah.
being responsive. So if you assume that there is like some underlying level of discomfort with
Hmm.
people, then your job, like you're the host. You're the host of this get together and you want to make people feel okay. And that's why people do icebreakers at the beginning, is to start that relationship. However, sometimes icebreakers are worse. I hate
I
icebreakers.
hate
I
them, but
hate
also
doing
I
them.
get why they're there.
I know.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of reasons that I stopped doing stand-up training because I did not like them.
So
But hang on,
yeah,
there's a question, and I
hold
was just
on.
wondering what it is.
Here we go. Let's see here. Um, I do adult training quite a bit through online forums, and it can be frustrating if there's no feedback. Crickets are the worst. The open-ended question idea is great, but can you be a bit more specific? Do you have any examples of questions that can be considered?
It would depend on the subject matter. So I usually try to go it depends on what I'm doing. It depends on if you're doing online training and you're doing virtual things, one of the things that we've done is, I don't know if you're using Teams or Zoom. I'm more familiar with Zoom, but we use breakout rooms so that people can go into smaller groups. And then there's usually a prescriptive question. So there's like a question of the day or something like that. And we all go into all these different rooms and then come back out and then have a discussion about it. So if nobody was talking even then, I would go to each breakout room and say, okay, choose a speaker and you decide who it is, and then that person is going to speak for your group and talk about, do the report. So that's one way that I would do it. To get better questions, sometimes I've done almost like fill in the blank. If it's really bad, like sometimes I'll go to almost fill in the blank. So if you're, I'm trying to think of trying to think of an example.
Mm.
So for example, the WLL stands for working load, and then they have to fill in the blank. But online, it's really difficult. So you almost have to have somebody that will start the talking for you. So if you're doing a bunch of strangers, then that can be really difficult, but then you can use a plant and have planted questions. Like, I know it seems terrible, but that can actually start it off. I would also try a go around the room, or well, the breakout rooms really work well. I would also try plants, or like if people are really not responding, I would try a plant. So
Right.
I don't know if that helps.
So we've got a comment here. I like the ideas. I teach accounting programs and the material can be dull. Now, I will say, in terms of just getting people to talk, one of the things I've done, I used to do with my older daughter when she was very young, and she was selectively mute. And so there were maybe two people in the world that she would talk to for a number of years. But one of the ways that we get her to talk is if someone said something wrong, she could not stop herself from correcting someone. She's wearing something pink. I really like that blue shirt. And she would drive her nuts and she would talk. And so in a group, I found sometimes, getting people to talk about something they don't like, a pet peeve,
Yes.
who's the worst kind of driver on the road, so on, so on. There are some potential dangers in opening that up, but in theory, getting people to just get used to the feeling of talking in a group can kind of lubricate the rest of the conversation.
And there do not, this just occurred to me because I was thinking about listening. I wasn't thinking about teaching as much, but using the chat. So this happens, I haven't done it because um, I haven't done it. I probably should. But where people will say, okay, here's the question in the chat, can everybody answer? And it can be something as simple from where are you from? Or what are you trying to get out of this course? Or ask a question or use poll questions so you can get some feedback from people. It may not be actual speaking, but you will get something. And using those kinds of questions as an icebreaker, what's your favorite X? What's your favorite sports team? Who would you like to play tennis with? Who would you like to have dinner with? And you can do this like really quickly just to make people laugh. And if you can make people laugh, then it actually really helps break the ice. For accounting, I'm laughing because I actually did teach I was teaching SAP to accountants and controllers and financial people. And I was talking about, I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I learned it and I kind of learned the presentation and went with that. And yes, it can be really dry. And what I would do in that case is give them something. I don't know if it's classroom or online. So if it depends on what you're doing, but you can do what's the worst experience you've ever had with this accounting program? What are, like just ask them questions. Just kind of that's more about themselves and, what is your experience? Do you think you're expert? Do you think, and use use polling, that really works. And then you can start to get them comfortable. People really want to be able to apply things. So telling stories is actually, you have to be careful with stories, but telling stories about um, what you would use something for, and when you find it really useful. I use a lot of self-deprecating humor, and so I'll do that. But break it up. So if it's really dry, break it up. Break it up into chunks that are manageable where they can feel successful, and do something non-accounting as almost like a celebration of, okay, we've achieved this. We've, coffee break, or, you know, people give out candy in classes, and I don't care how old you are, people want the candy.
Absolutely right.
They
So
absolutely want candy.
we've touched a bit on online stuff, but and we've talked about situational awareness. So now I want to handcuff your situational awareness, and you're now leading a virtual session, cameras off. So a lot of those things that you would rely on in the classroom, they're just gone. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you do?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's tough. I think the worst experience that I've had is doing a presentation on Zoom where I can't see anybody and there's no faces. You're talking into the void. I call it talking into the void, and it's brutal. And you kind of just get through it. You get used to it. It 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 is what it is. It's kind of the world we live in. So that's when I would use the chat. I think the chat is a really good opportunity, or use breakout rooms to get people into smaller groups. I would use polling, all of those polling tools that Zoom has, and I assume that Teams has as well. I would use them to break it up. But when you are trying to, like, I'll notice, I think it's just because I've practiced a long time. My son has mild autism. He's on the autism spectrum, and it was the same thing. He didn't talk. So you have to pay attention. Like when kids don't talk, you are they won't tell you. Like I remember one time when he couldn't breathe because he had asthma. Like me, I have asthma as well. So I understand, like he looked like he was kind of having problems breathing, and I'm having this really big, argument with Mark, say, whether or not this kid can breathe. And he couldn't. He was having trouble. He was having an asthma attack. And but you pay attention, you pay a lot of attention. So I pay attention to, I like to have everybody not muted. I prefer to have people not muted, like muting their microphones,
Mm-hmm.
because then I have the opportunity to hear their like when they don't talk and they're reacting or responding. So that's when I say, can you guys take your, put your
Yep.
unmute because I want to hear you. I need to have something. So I don't think that's an issue. If you're leading a meeting, then you absolutely have the right to say, hey, guys, unmute, please. If it's a large group and you unmute, you're going to get the crazy noises. But in a smaller group, I definitely unmute, but also listen for this. And so when they unmute, because people are muted and they don't have the cameras on, you have no idea unless you do polls or a chat or something. You just have no
Are they
idea.
even there? You don't know.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so you have to be careful of, I mean, there are you have to have a certain amount of trust to have no cameras and no audio. Or you have to feel like I'm just going to say stuff and you can take it or leave it and I don't care. But if you
Park and burn.
care about it, then you have to figure out how you're going to get that little bit of audio information that you can from your listeners. So I listen for size.
Mm.
Size are very they're very
Or
telling.
ahas, right? Like, oh,
Or if I make a joke, does anybody laugh? Like, am I in the void? And be aware that when you're in the audience and someone is speaking and you're just on mute and everybody's on mute and there's no cameras, that person is plowing through and with no validation or anything. And it's tough. It's very, very tough. It can be done, and I've done it. I prefer not to do it. Just because it's nicer to talk to people who are responding.
sure.
So
So,
actually, I just want to
yeah.
interrupt, but we
Mm.
decided to stop doing our webinars with just like one head talking because of that, because it was so difficult. So having the conversation is just so much easier.
100%. So we've talked about in class, and we talked about online with a group, and I want to talk about listening skills one-on-one, whether that's virtual or in person. Let's say virtual for now. Do any of those listening skills change, or does your approach change now that you just got one person, or is it
Not
same basic?
really.
Yeah.
Not really. I don't feel like it does. I mean, this might be completely different, but in terms of the ability to listen, it's just how your attention is compromised, right? So if you were talking one-on-one with someone, then you can gauge their response. And I think what the biggest mistake that people make is that they don't gauge the response. They just plow ahead with what they want to say. And they don't ask questions. They just state what their opinions are. And that's not a conversation. That is what do you call it? A manifesto.
Right. Right.
So when you want to have a one-on-one conversation with someone for whatever reason, then you have to give them space. You have to listen to their opinions. And so what you have to do is make sure that your emotions, if it's a difficult conversation, you have to make sure that your emotions are like, okay, I'm checking them at the door. And sometimes I plan them out. I'm going to look at, okay, I need to say this to someone. These are the possible responses. This is the response that I want. This is how I want it to go, but it could go like this, and this. And then because you've planned it out, you're not taken by surprise. And that's another time when your listening skills are going to go right down, when you're taken by surprise and you're like, I did not expect that to happen. So in a classroom, this happens all the time. Power goes out. What do you do? I mean, if the power goes out here right now, well, you're probably going to take over. And, or if Zoom went down, then we
Mhm.
would have like something to do. But if the power goes out in your training room, what are you going to do? Um, if
If the tech
if
fails.
somebody asks you a question or if somebody starts, hitting someone, what are you going to do? So you have to kind of think of how you're going to approach it beforehand. And then when you calm down, so the level of risk is on you as well as your listeners, right?
Hmm.
When you're in a risky situation, your emotions are up here and you want to get them down. So planning is how you get them down. And when you have a one-on-one, which can be perfectly pleasant, and or you're listening and you catch something that is like, whoa, wait a minute, we have an issue here.
Hmm.
And then let's stop, let's take a break. But if you're not going to, if you are tired or you are overwhelmed, it's going to be difficult. But if you're having a difficult conversation, make sure the paths that you're going to take and what is going to press your buttons and that kind of thing, so that you're not you the emotions aren't going to impact your listening skills. And I would say this for any conversation: when you start to get emotional, you're not listening anymore. Like that's just how our bodies work.
Right.
And so like when you're having a personal argument, exactly the same thing. You're not listening. So you're having a fight with your partner about who's loading the dishwasher properly. Nobody is making any sense anymore.
So I was thinking a little bit more about follow up. So you've delivered some training. Maybe you've delivered online training, and then you're going to follow up in person on how that went. And there is feedback that you're going to get that is direct and say verbal, and then you've got those nonverbal stuff, and then you've got verbal feedback that is not accurate. So they're saying something, but it's actually sitting on top of something else. So you offer them the training, you follow up later, and they say to you, that sucked. It was awful. It was terrible.
People don't ever say that directly to you. They usually say it in like a smile sheet or give us your comments about the session, blah, blah, blah. And that's when you get the fun time. I don't know if anybody's gotten those, but I have. And there was a couple that were, I would say, a little wacko. Like it was like, what session were you in? Because I didn't, what? There was one time when somebody accused me of intimidating someone, and I was like, I was just teaching. I think it was in a controlling class. I think it was in a class about SAP, the controlling module. So it was finance, and I'm like, I don't know. don't remember. Everybody else seemed to think it went okay. So feedback like that, so feedback kind of runs the gamut from really out there that you weren't expecting to, yeah, everything went fine. And it's important, depends on it. The problem that I have with a lot of these feedback forms is they don't actually ask you for the feedback that's going to help a trainer or is going to
Mm,
have, it's like, what did you like best? What activity did you like the best? What did you think of the room? Blah, blah, blah. But they don't say, were all my questions answered? Is this what is the material what I expected? Do you have any additional questions about the content? So like think about the answers that you want to get from a review or a like on a feedback form,
mm,
and think about whether it's useful or not. But a lot of the time, especially when you're doing feedback for companies, they only ask you about the stuff that they know they haven't messed up. Like so I'm always in the like other comments. You did not even ask. And so that's but in terms of feedback, I mean, what you can do is if you are doing like continual training and
mm.
doing the same thing all the time, then you can incorporate that feedback into your next thing. You can call the person, you can talk to people about the feedback if it wasn't anonymous. But what I tend to try and do is incorporate that feedback just into the next one and think about, okay, how am I doing this? This was confusing, so I'm going to move this around. I do that all the time where, you look at something you did a year ago and you gotta change it because I don't know. I do this all the time with my work as I look at old stuff and I want to refresh it. And I think it's really important if you're doing the same training over and over and over again. Sometimes you need to go back and say, am I even teaching this the right way? Like, would this make more sense if I did it in a different order? Would it make more
Mm.
sense? Or would it be more interesting if I did this or had this activity? And when you're in the middle of it, it's difficult, but if you take a break from it, then you can look at it or have someone else coming into the room or attending the session and say, okay, what did you like? What did you not like? What do you think we could change? And that I think that's really helpful to have. And then if people are saying, I don't think that these people's questions got answered, then that's something where, oh, I wasn't listening or I wasn't paying attention.
Right.
That situational awareness wasn't there for whatever reason. And everybody has a bad day. That is definitely for sure.
It's also the case, though, that someone might say, I didn't like this, when what they mean is it was hard or I was confused.
So this is something that I don't think we've touched on, but you can tell. You can tell when people are confused, and it's because they have a number of reactions. And this is why I said if nobody is saying anything, stop and make sure that everybody is up to snuff. So for the person who said, what do I do if I'm not getting any responses? You got to figure out how to get some kind of response so you can gauge whether or not you're on the right track.
Mm.
So maybe it's text, maybe it's a poll, maybe it's you just have to wait in the silence and say, can somebody please answer the question? And just wait because sometimes that works and it's just horrific for you because you want to fill up the space.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you need to do that or talk to people afterwards and say, is this, what did you think of this? Do we have to do something different next time? And that way you can get a little bit more feedback. And like I said, a plant is always good. Someone who is going to be on your side and help you out, but also give you that feedback. So people will do nothing when they don't understand and they're confused, like absolutely nothing blank. Or they'll do a lot of nodding. So don't take a nod as a
Oh,
yes, you're
interesting.
doing
That
fine.
that's kind of
Tons of
important
people
because that's
nod,
kind
they
of
have
a
no idea.
it's like a pretty standard, like, yes, I understand, but it's
But
just not
people
quite
do
true.
that when they're confused and they're embarrassed. And they do, people who English is a second language. Yeah, I've had kids just nod at me and I'm like, you have no idea what I'm talking about to you. But adults do it as well. And
Right.
like, it's not just ESL, it's whoever. So just if they're not actually engaging, nodding is an interesting fake out, they're
Yeah.
nodding. So that's why I like to ask questions. So some of the questions that I do are just reviews of what I've said. So going back to the question that we had, I'll talk about working load limit, and I'll talk about how to calculate it and how it works with cargo securement. And then I'll say, okay, I'm going to give you a pop quiz. What does WLL stand for? What does, what is the WLL of this chain if I had a chain sitting there? Um, you know, just really, really, really easy questions that people can answer with comfort that somebody is going to get. And you have to go more and more simple sometimes. And then you can gauge your instruction and think, okay, they understood what WLL stood for, but they didn't know how to apply it. So I have to go back and kind of go step by step. Where did you get lost? It's not the class. It's you. It's what, so you did not have the wherewithal to try and break down the information enough to get it into their heads without them feeling that they were at risk because they couldn't understand. So you have to go back to the drawing board, break it down, break it down, break it down. And sometimes shooting a super easy question at them that everybody, what day is it? And then they'll answer the question
Everyone's
and
like,
they'll
I don't
have
know.
practice. They'll have practice in answering the question. What day is
Right.
it? It's Tuesday, right? What month is it? What's your favorite month? Well, maybe not so
Yeah.
like antagonistic,
But
but
but the lower risk questions,
yeah,
lowering the risk of embarrassment of being wrong, and then use those inroads to evaluate how much they're actually understanding. Is
yes.
that right?
But
Yeah.
you need to get a response somehow. You need to get a response. If you are teaching, and I don't really consider this a teaching thing. It's more of a presentation thing. So, or
Mhm.
if I'm in a classroom, what I would do, and if you needed to learn about listening skills, I would have broken it down into, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this. These are learning objectives. And when it comes time to make sure that people learned it, I would be like, okay, you know, is listening skills all about talking? Yes or no?
Jane, I have to say, we've got 2 minutes left and we just had a question pop up. So if you're
Yay.
ready, as an OTR driver
Mhm.
trainer on a break or end of day, never while they're driving, we recap the day, and that seems to help greatly.
Absolutely. Especially if you talk about something that happened while they were driving, if you keep it, and I would actually, if you can, oh, you said on a break. So I think that doing whatever happened in the most recent time.
Mhm.
So if something happened and you get a break, recap it on the break. And then you could recap whatever you recapped. Yeah, I would do it again. Like, I
Mhm.
don't think you can do too many of those. You could just keep talking about it.
Right.
And then do the questions like, so, okay, so what do you do in that situation? A, B, and C, or if you can break it down into, like, say they were um, following distance,
Mhm.
you know, how do you calculate following distance? And if they don't know, if they haven't done, if they can't figure that out by the end of the day, then you have a different problem. But
Do you want to answer
like
one more in 45 seconds?
yeah,
We got one
absolutely.
more in the chat. All right. I was training a driver and he was not understanding the material. I
Mhm.
tried a few different ways of training to see if it would help. I asked smaller questions, broke it down, etc. The individual kept wanting to give up and wouldn't try at all. What would you do in this situation?
I would stop trying to teach him and ask him why he's giving up so easily. I would say, okay,
Mhm.
so what's going on? You having you can do this. And that's the other thing that I would do is tell them, absolutely, you can do this. I absolutely believe that by the end of this day or by the end of the week, you are going to be able to do this. But however, we're going to break it down and we're going to see if you can, we want you to succeed at this, this, and this. So obviously something you don't feel like that, why? And ask them.
Because
I've
nothing
done
else is going to
this. I
happen
have
until you unblock that, right?
I have stopped training to do that. I have stopped classes. And this was accounting. It's had an accounting. It's
Hmm.
the same accounting class where the crazy woman was. But there's where they were all like so angry about something. And I said, okay, can and I've told this story so many times, so I feel like I'm repeating myself. But I stopped them and said, okay, can you guys tell me what's going on? There seems to be something wrong. And I had inadvertently told them that their boss was changing, that they were getting a reorg. And I didn't know because I was told to do, I was a consultant. So I was told to put this in. It had been approved and all of that stuff. And then I spent the rest of the class like just dealing with that. Got out a flip chart and was like, okay, can you tell me what you want me to tell the team? And like, so we wrote down all of this stuff. I took it back and said, okay, that class did not go how I thought it was going to go, but
Because
I
they were
think
working
they
through the
feel
stages of grief.
better.
Wow.
Exactly. And they
Yeah.
didn't want to tell me because, well, I don't know. I don't know. But that's how I dealt with it. And so the emotions in that case are way too high for that person to learn anything. And that's what I think it probably is that there's a distraction element going on and they feel like
Hmm.
they're going to fail. So they're basically giving up before they've even started.
Right. Well,
Have a heart to
Jane,
heart.
unfortunately, we are out of time. But this was a great session, and I really appreciate it. Extremely informative. And we will be sending out the recording, and of course, it's going to appear on YouTube, where people should like and subscribe so that they get the
Absolutely.
full series and notifications when all the new ones.
And actually, if you have any questions about strategies, send me a message at jane@carriersedge.com and just say I have a classroom question and from listening skills. Absolutely, I will see what strategies I can come up with to I have had a lot of there's a reason that I like online training now.
Amazing.
So
Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming, and we
thank
will see
you.
you next month for one more episode. Thanks very much.